the Catherine, and with the greatest of respect to the members of the rural group, and I agree with them on many issues, particularly in relation to their concerns, but to introduce a debate in the manner of reducing people who are involved in Taisce to cranks, crackpots and serial objectors versus normal people is not only unacceptable to me, as someone who's spent 17 years at local level and knows exactly what goes on with planning matters, but it's also unacceptable because it's disingenuous and dangerous, and it deflects the debate from where it should be at in terms of what is it we want from our planning laws, and particularly on a day, as Deputy Breach Smith has said, when tonight the planning law will be guillotined and pushed through. And let me say, in relation to that, that's totally unacceptable. I wish these 2 hours were used for that, notwithstanding that every group chooses. But this is catastrophic what's ahead of us tonight in terms of the Planning Bill, Minister. Unfortunately, you're always there when I'm speaking at the end. And I know your heart is in the right place, but unfortunately, you're now part of a system and a government that's putting through a planning bill that reduces people's participation. Absolutely reducing people's participation in the planning process at a time when we need it more than ever. And why do we need it more than ever? Because we have a climate catastrophe and we have a biodiversity. And not alone that, but we need to learn from COVID that we need transformative action in every sense of the word. And so I'm here today, and I absolutely support you in relation to your concerns for the decimation or the depopulation of rural areas. We have no planning guidelines, na tróirice don Gaeltacht, tá bhís fósaigh fanacht ar na tróirice sin, agus tá muidig fanacht ar na tróirice planála do de ceantar túise log. A réir bhí crinú I Rosmuc, agus tháinig gá do gram le céile, agus dagri siad an crinú bánú agus conran na Gaeilge, chun a coranúl Jeis a hort no coswincher na háte a coranúl na rudaí atá chur imní olmhór orthú ó híh cuasaí tíochta agus bánú na Gaeltachtaí. Agus an focail sin bánú tá an leide sa teideal, bánú cílíonn sé depopulation. Sin an focail. Tá conra Gaeilge an talamh le fadan lá I coranúl go bhfuil athrú suntasach ag tastal agus bánú le blian ó go anús chun an spot tholas a dhíriú isteach ar na faibanna ó híh cuasaí tíochta ó híh cead planála agus maidir le tithe inachhuine agus tithe sóisialta. Níl siad a fáil éonáit I cos airge. So I'll go back to this motion now and say a thank you was given for the research. I see no example of research here, I'm afraid to say, except the citing of one Supreme Court case. And research would dictate that we would look at all of the applications made by on Taisce if we're seriously interested in looking at their record. But I'm not here in a sense to defend on Taisce. What I'm here to say is it's deeply worrying that this type of discussion would proceed in this way on a date where we're actually reducing the participation of ordinary people to make submissions. I absolutely object to the word objection. If that's not a funny way of putting it. But I don't think objections carry anything. They're submissions by concerned residents and citizens in relation to the planning law. And over a long time now, we have proceeded to reduce the ability of concerned people to put in submissions. And we started that at local authority level, where we stopped them appealing to Bord Pleanála if they hadn't made a submission at local level, and we introduced charges. In this bill, we're making it even worse in terms of onerous obligations on, for example, a residents' committee, that they have to be in place for a year or more, and so on, when quite the opposite is needed. And I'm not saying that. The various judges have said that there's a trinity when it comes to the planning laws, and they're all equally important. The person who makes the submission, the authority that's given the permission, and the developer. And now we see a bill going through tonight, guillotined. It's even hard at this stage to think we're doing that when you look at what this country has been through. We had the McCracken Tribunal, and the McCracken Tribunal was set up for payments to politicians. It did very well. It reported in 6 months, in 100 pages. excellent, quick, and told us exactly what was happening with payments to politicians. Then we had the Moriarty Tribunal established in '97. Final report was 11 or 12. The cost was 65.5 million. What was the title of that tribunal? Tribunal of Inquiry into Certain Payments to Politicians. Payments to politicians and related matters. Then we had the Flood Mahon Tribunal, Tribunal of Inquiry into Certain Planning Matters and Payments, established '97, the same year as the Moriarty. The final report was in 2012 or 13. It cost 159 million. On corruption in public life, Judge Mahon stated in the report, corruption continued because nobody was prepared to do enough to stop it. That is perhaps inevitable when corruption ceases to become an isolated event and becomes so entrenched that it is transformed into an acknowledged way of doing business, specifically because corruption affected every level of Irish political life. Those with the power to stop it were frequently implicated by it. And I'll give another quote as I have 2 minutes left. It is clear from these inquiries, this is the Mahon Tribunal, that these concerns of corruption, payments to politicians and so on were well-founded. Throughout that period, corruption in Irish political life was both endemic and systemic. It affected every level of government, from some holders of top ministerial positions to some local councillors and so on. Time prevents me from quoting that, and I've only mentioned 3 tribunals, and arising from that, you would think that we might use our time in this stall to see how many of the recommendations, if any, have been implemented to ensure that that won't happen again. We might be using our time in the Dáil to look at SIPO and their annual reports that continuously highlight the difficulties that they have in enforcing the legislation because of lack of sufficient power. We're talking here about conflicts of interest, ethics in public life, and corruption doesn't go away. Bad behaviour doesn't go away. We know that from the Dáil, and we don't seem to learn. And I don't think it helps in any way at all that a motion like this deflects from what we should be talking about, which is making planning efficient, open and accountable, resourcing it. I think what happened, the figures that I saw when this bill was put before us, correct me if I'm wrong, Minister, but somewhere between 400 and 600 vacancies in the planning system. Vacancies, over 400. How could a planner do their job properly? And then we go to Bord Pleanála, and we have legislation going through tonight which is changing the name of Bord Pleanála. There's no need to change the name of it. There is a need to ask how people were appointed that had serious conflicts of interest and failed to recognise they had conflicts of interest, and failed to resource Bord Pleanála, and failed to make it more efficient and effective so that we can trust it. It is our planning system. And I'm going to finish on quoting Sinead Mercier, who was tremendous work in educating us TDs. And she said it's set to pass, not the usual, will we say cranks? We use your terminology, not the usual cranks and crackpots, but the legal and planning professions have criticised it for breaching EU and international law and for its potential to clog the planning. The Attorney General has told the government private correspondence that part of the bill give the appearance that the government is being led by developers. And then we have the strategic infrastructure. I will finish for liquid, I rarely go over my time, liquid gas being put under the strategic infrastructure with no accountability. So on every level, I deplore this motion, while I share their concerns in relation to Bánu na Tuaithe. Thank you for your